Hi everyone, my name is Oliver. I'm going to be the webmaster for today's webinar on asset management. And with me for the presenter, we have Nareem Faruqi. Naeem is a leader in transit asset management, having completed over $31 billion worth of asset management plans for organizations across the globe. Naeem has pioneered bus lifecycle tools and optimization for equipment replacement in his academic research. He is the recipient of many industry awards, including Mass Transit's Top 40 Under 40 and Clean 50's Emerging Leader Awards. He will be the co-teacher as well as Sharina, who could not be here today. I've also got with me Kevin Brown, who is the Learning Business Development Manager here at CUDA. Now, if any of you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them in the actual program itself. There's a questions tab on as part of the program. And without further ado, here's our presenter, Naeem.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm excited today to talk to you guys about the benefits of having a robust transit asset management plan. So as we get started, what is asset management? What is that top of mind thing that comes to your when you think asset management? I know a lot of people have told me that, look, we do asset management. We've been doing it for 20, 30 years. But asset management is a little bit different than managing your asset. What asset management is the approach where you look at your organization on a more longer term and understand what your assets are going to cost you today and tomorrow. And so one of the places where you can get that information is what is the definition of asset management. So if you look at the ISO standard 55,000, it's a coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from assets. If you look at the National Transit Institute, a strategic and systematic approach to managing transit physical assets. It focuses on business and engineering processes from resource allocation and utilization with the objective of better decision making based upon quality information and well-defined objectives. And if you go to the Institute of Asset Management, it's the management of physical assets, their selection, maintenance, inspection, and renewal. These are all definitions that different industry organizations have come together. But all of these, why do they matter to you all of a sudden? And there's a great emphasis now being put on asset management in Ontario and across Canada. And, if you go today with a transit project to the Canada Infrastructure Bank, they're going to ask you for the asset management component. If you even go for capital funding, you'll be asked. In Ontario, there's a Building Together guide for municipal asset management plans that tells municipalities that, look, you need to actually have an asset management plan in place so that Treasury can better understand your funding request over a 10, 20-year horizon. And simultaneously, legislation has come up like Bill 6, which is an act to enact the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act, which sort of sets farther the tone and requirements around asset management for an organization. So you're talking federal, provincial governments influencing municipalities, and municipalities then in turn looking to their transit organizations and saying, hey guys, what's your asset management plan? And it all boils down to the favorite conversation I have with people time over and again is, do you have an asset inventory? Do you know how much you own? Just starting with the simple building blocks of an asset management plan is very critical. I've been to many organizations that through our conversations discover they own more than they thought, right? Things disappear, especially in a large organization. So it's good to understand that sort of entire holistic approach, and that's done through the asset inventory. So why does asset management matter? Asset management can lower long-term costs for asset preservation, yield more consistent performance, enhance safety, optimize your asset portfolio, and promote better decision-making. We are in the age of big data. If you want to make an argument today, you need to have evidence, and evidence comes from your asset management work order systems, your ERM, and those tell you that, look, when my bus is now 19 years, it's costing me 4 times more than when it was at 12 years, and it's time to look at retirement. That evidence-based decision-making is the cornerstone of asset management, right? And that is what here at CUDA the course has been developed to address for municipalities. How do we give you the right surgical tools to do what you need to do to optimize your organization? That's how this course was developed by Sharina Hussain, the professor who couldn't be with us today. So if we look at this, it's better management of assets, which is optimized asset lifecycle cost, then it's sustainable service cost and risk profile, which is consistent performance, enhancements to safety, enhanced capital planning, and then you optimize your overall portfolio, and promote organizational objectives, promote decision making. So we call this path the line of sight from an organizational objective. Which if we look at the transit systems vision statements, they're like they want to move people efficiently, safely across an area, right? But how do you actually boil that down? Well, if you want to do it safely, you know that the vehicle breakdown will increase if that bus was 40 years old. So that's the element, right? That you take that vision and you make it into a very granular KPI-based asset monitoring feature, which is the bus life cycle. What's your mean kilometers between defects? So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is one of the most common conversations I have: managing assets or asset management. So let's just take a moment and discuss this a little bit. So managing your assets, things you do to the assets to keep them functioning, done with or without a structured organizational strategy and context. When your bus breaks down, you most likely you tell your mechanics or your staff to fix it and put it back on the road. That is what we think about managing assets, right? Or you're following an OEM preventative maintenance schedule, doing your oil changes at 5,000 or 10,000 interval. That's all part of the managing asset. The asset management is managing assets with a context of an organizational purpose and strategy with prioritization, encompassing many organization levels and applying to all functions or departments. Monitor asset performance to establish levels of service and KPIs. So the asset management of that would be different than just fixing the buses. Is this bus due for retirement in the next year? Have we established an end of life, useful life for this? Are we retiring this at 12, 13, et cetera, to 18, 19 years? That is different. And it's really about setting that vision. So if your organization wants to transport people in an efficient, safe manner, if that's your vision and your board's direction to you guys, then that comes down all the way to how you frame your level of service, how you monitor KPIs. You don't want those buses breaking down. They could be streetcars. I shouldn't be writing on buses so much, but there's other assets. We cover the facility as well. We talk about that element. We talk about your stations and shelters. What's the sort of frequency of inspection, how you monitor condition, map out the useful life. These are all things that we talk about and explain. So looking at it from a colleague's perspective, managing your asset, again, is the asset data, location, condition, current KPIs, department, budget, asset management, information supported decision, lifecycle strategies to support business aims, collaboration across departments, stakeholders. So they're managing to a cost, a current performance, or a response to failure, maintaining function. Asset management, triple bottom line value, clarity of purpose for the organization, and impact on organizational objectives. And when you talk about the management lens in an organization, you're talking short-term gains and losses for managing your assets, departmental, individual performance, savings, especially OPEX. And then on asset management, you're talking long-term value, confidence and capability, business risk understood and mitigated. So what are the elements of asset management plans? So in the next few slides, we'll talk about that and explain what the various elements are and how this course actually fits in and gives you the tools to carry that out. So this is an example of the life cycle strategy and planning where we walk through a transit system and explain, how do you go from I need a vehicle that will transport 20 to 30 people at one time, be able to run up and down various terrains and various weather conditions. So we sort of walk you through that element. We go, okay, requirement definition. careful need identification from user groups and customers. So what are they actually looking for? They want plush seats when they sit down, or are they okay standing? You know, it's that conversation. What is that technical? You need it to operate 600 kilometers uninterrupted because that's your daily block cycle. That's important. So then you go to the asset planning. What is required from the asset once it's procured? What is this asset going to do day in and day out, right? From there, you go to procuring commission. You develop the specification using previous steps and ensure asset is delivered as promised. So, you know, you take all that learning from the user groups, from the stakeholders and the customers, and you write your technical spec. Then you put it out to market. You evaluate it, and then you ensure that the OEM is actually building to that requirement. From there, you go into the operation and maintenance phase, where that's where you're putting that asset out out every day, and you're looking at how it's performing. And what you want to do is interventions based on OEM requirements, based on your legislative requirements, and based on what you've learned from your own asset intelligence over the years, that this works for me, this doesn't work for me, so I need my maintenance interval to be adjusted, right? From there, it's asset monitoring that asset on a continuous basis against a performance criterion. And then along that path, be it a bus or a facility or a streetcar, you're going to have to invest in overhaul and restoration of that asset. So that's where you decide, okay, what components are you going to rebuild to extend that life of that asset, and does it make sense to rebuild them or to decommission the asset? So overhaul and decommissioning, so they go hand in hand. Usually on a transit bus, you do see powertrains being redone through the midlife. In other assets, they even look at decommissioning because it might be more efficient that way. So then you go to the decommissioning stage. Are you retiring the asset appropriately? And is there any opportunity to take components from this asset and recycle or reuse them in the rest of your fleet? So that's part of that conversation. And then asset intelligence. You take that whole life cycle, what you've learned from it, and you reapply it in your next procurement. Maybe a propulsion technology doesn't work for you, or you've learned that this technology is very good and you want to make sure it's part of all procurements going forward. It's things like that that you need to think about, and that's the framework that the course gives you around life cycle strategy and planning. You know, we take a dive into operations and maintenance policy around corrective maintenance, preventative and predictive maintenance, and opportunistic maintenance and minor repairs. We actually show you the tools and templates that you need to actually build out your maintenance plan in your organization and understand where the economic optimal point of interjection is for your organization. That's part of this course. You know, it's a 10-week course, so we dedicate 2 weeks. We teach you theory and then we apply that theory. Another big element of an asset management framework is the roles and responsibilities. So we will walk you through RACES, and as part of the course, it's not just sitting behind a screen, but you actually get homework where you go and interact with, other departments within your organization and understand what their role is and map that out in your asset management process. And then financial accountability, understanding the total cost of ownership, how that's built up, is all part of this course. So when you're looking at the asset management plan, we look at the non-infrastructure solutions as well, the maintenance activities, the renewal, rehabilitation activities, replacement, disposal, and growth, all of those. So you're given tools, especially a template that helps you map that out and understand, okay, this is what we need to do, and this is how our fleet plan looks, or this is how our storage capacity is constrained. This is our new building envelope plan, or our stops are monitoring the state of stops and shelters in terms of condition assessment. So in a nutshell, the course over 10 weeks takes you through each of these stops. We try to make it as transit graphical, with being stops along the route. Your destination at the end is to develop a transit asset management plan. And week one, you're introduced to asset management. You go through the SCM readiness scale, as part of that exercise, and you understand, okay, what do I understand, or where is my organization's asset maturity? Then we walk about asset status. And asset status, we're really talking about your asset inventory. Do you have a pulse on what you own? Right? Then from there we go into asset performance, which is to understand the condition of those assets. What is the health of them? And we give you tools that you can then understand how to map out your condition of your portfolio and look at things like backlog, state of good repair. The next element is the level of service. And here we talk about state of good repair. State of good repair is a great term that everyone throws around, but there's no uniform definition I can give you guys. Every system does it a little bit differently. And I treat it more like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. State of good repair is in the asset user's perception. So, for some people, state of good repair means that the asset has been retired at the appropriate age as defined by the organization. It has zero backup. For others, it means, that the asset is performing within operating conditions, X, Y, and Z. If it exceeds those, then it's a backlog issue. So different issues there. So that's the level of service conversation, which morphs into some KPIs, where we talk about how do you actually map some KPIs and performance around this level of service. Then we move into lifecycle strategy. In lifecycle strategy, we actually talk about how do you build tools and asset management functions that can clearly show you what's the optimal point of replacement. From the lifecycle strategy, which is total cost of ownership, we move into the operation and maintenance component, because you only spend 20% of your total cost of ownership on the capital purchase. You'll spend 80% of that TCO on the operation and maintenance. So we actually dive in a little bit deeper, and we look at how is your maintenance policy actually running? Is it efficient? Are there areas that we can tweak and alter? So that conversation takes you through that week of the course. Then we talk about fleet and facilities management. We talk about the building envelope, how your garage functions, how, in second sourcing your operation versus insourcing, when is the right time? So we give you examples where you can actually play out scenarios and compare, well, if I built this transmission in-house, it's going to cost X dollars. If I built it outside, it would cost me X dollars. So you get those opportunities to take on various case studies in the course and carry them out. So after you complete the fleet and facilities management, you move to the KPIs and performance management. So here we've built dashboard templates, and we walk you through over 50 KPIs used in transit that you can then start using in your organization, and having a resource like you to learn how to use their annual stats book and see how you can integrate those KPIs right in and see how you're doing against your peers. From the KPIs, we move into the roles and responsibilities, which is and financial systems. And the roles and responsibilities, we sort of tell you, what's the lay of the land, who you need to know, how your organization works, and we work through you to help you map that out. And we do a stakeholder influence matrix, and we show you the importance of developing those relationships to moving your transit asset management plan forward and getting the capital you need. And then looking at the financial cost of doing that. From there, the last week of the course, you're looking at developing the asset management plan. So you're given 3 weeks to then go home, go and do your asset management plan. And you're given a step-by-step guidebook to sort of how to do this asset management plan. Depending on how ambitious you are, you can do your entire organization, or you can just do your function or your area of work. So just to recap, so by the end of the course, you will be able to use course tools to increase your organization's position on the FCM's asset management readiness scale. So you do the readiness scale when you start in week 1, and you do it again after you finish your final assignment. You explains the fundamentals of asset management and applies its principles to 5 public transit asset classes: facilities, stations and shelters, guideways and track, rolling stock and systems. Apply life cycle planning and costing for each asset class. Prepare a transit asset management plan and annual work plan that reflects different stages of asset procurement, maintenance, overall, and disposal. Support the creation of and implementation of asset management budgets. Evaluate and measure existing asset management policies and procedures. This will help develop and implement KPIs to continue to monitor the state of your organization's transit assets. Learn to use transit industry-specific templates for your organization. thank you. That finishes my portion of the presentation.
Oh, so thank you, Naeem. Did I hear that right? You've been working with about $31 billion worth of assets?
Yes.
So in your experience, then, what are the benefits of adopting the asset management plan for those kinds of organizations?
Yeah, so over my career, I've worked with different organizations, and they can have a portfolio that's a few $1 million all the way up to a few $1 billion, and they all struggle with the same issues. When you have an asset management plan, you sort of have the coach's playbook in your back pocket. You sort of know what way you're going and what the team has to do, and the organizations that go down that path and develop that, they know what they own, which is like so important, especially if you're an organization that's got 50, 60 years behind it. There's a lot of stuff on your asset inventory that might have never been removed, and just going through that exercise is important. Or if you're a new organization, things can be missed, or you can set that threshold. You can say everything above $10,000 I want on my asset inventory, so we can see where it is and hold people accountable to those assets over its life. Because when you buy it brand new, yes, it gets attention, but after a few years, it sort of floats in the system, right? And there are a lot of specialty equipment that have that fate. And
I heard you say, so the data-driven decision-making, this could help support people who are in that phase of, do we stay with diesel versus going with electric? Does this having an asset management plan extend to making those kinds of decisions as well?
Yeah, so I think asset management plans lend nicely to when you're making big organizational decisions like that, because it might change the way how you spend money. You might be spending $1 million on a bus, on an electric bus, versus $500,000 on diesel, but then your maintenance is like 30-40% less. So it's that total cost of ownership understanding. So good asset management thinking helps an organization to actually make those types of complex decisions. Again, you can even look at the fuel. So you're going to be paying 80 cents a diesel liter, 80, 90 cents, and you're paying 13 cents a kilowatt hour, right? So you've got to invest in some upfront capital in terms of chargers, right? So it's a little bit different, but you have to understand that total cost and see how that cash flow or capital outlay impacts your finance department. So that's why it's important. So you can actually show with an asset management plan, look, over the next 10 years, I was going to spend $50 million, but I want to spend $50 million over the next 10 years, but I want to do it this way, so that they don't feel like all of a sudden they have to go and create money, which is a very hard thing to do.
As we all know, as we apply for grants and write up those proposals. So I'll give one last question, and then perhaps we can go to any questions that are out there. This course that we're offering actually applies to many different types of assets. I was surprised to see rolling stock on there, as well as facilities and the buses that we use. Stations and stops, another one. This methodology that you teach applies to all those assets that may be out there, regardless of type or location.
Yes, and that's very important. We give you the broad understanding and the tools that you can apply for different types of asset classes. So if you look at, we tell you to create the state of good repair key. That's your definition. It's based on 5 elements, and you work through that. But let's say you're a big organization and you've got a rail division, you've got a bus division, and they see it a little bit differently, right? So that way your definition can be different, but your organizational one can be overarching, but then each asset. So if you look at WMATA, New York, TTC, or Chicago, they'll break it down by their asset class, because even that one asset class might be $1 billion for CTA in Chicago, right? Their buses might be $1 billion on the books alone. Their rail might be a few billion as well. So they sort of use that same logic, but working with their asset users. they come up with the right definition that will fit them.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful for your time today. If there are any other questions, please feel free to use the chat box, and we'll keep the line open for another couple of minutes.
Yeah. So I think one thing I would like to highlight while we're waiting for more questions to come in is that this will be the second time this course is offered by CUDA. The first group that did go through this course, we had large systems with over 500 buses, and we had systems with as little as, I think, 12 buses. And they each took away from there a lot. And, you know, I think, so if you're a big system and you're thinking it's not for you because you have sophisticated CRM systems, you know, sometimes it's good to actually just look at the basics and understand how to build the logic forward. So for the big systems, there's an opportunity there. And for the small systems, this is your playbook on how to do asset management in transit.
Very good, and thank you for that. I failed to mention that you and Sharina will be kicking off the asset management course again the week of September 19th. There's still opportunity to enroll if anyone on the call is interested in developing their skills. And this asset management course is a online distance learning course, so it's quite flexible for people's schedules. The time commitment is usually 1 to 3 hours a week, and then at the end you will have a usable output in the sense that you have already created an asset management plan which can be replicated throughout your organization.
Yeah, and it's great ROI for your organization to actually send staff through this, because if you start developing that asset management plan, some of those documents can cost you a few $100,000 to develop. So by empowering your own staff to understand the principles and then apply them with their years of experience of your organization is really beneficial. So when CUDA came to Sharina and me and asked this question, I was like, I would love to be part of it, because I think there's a lot of organizations out there that are shy to look towards consultants and others and want to try doing things on their own. And CUDA, being the industry's association, has a great opportunity to provide that learning and that transition of knowledge to those individuals.
All right, so I don't see any more questions coming in. I'm going to thank Kevin, and especially thank Naeem for our presentation. If you guys have any follow-up questions, you can email webinar@cudaactu.ca. And thank you all for attending this webinar.